Hi, I'm Susie Kroll. I'm a co-responding mental health professional for several law enforcement agencies here in King County. I have the privilege today to talk to you about a couple things that mean very much to me. It was my sincerest hope that I would be able to do this with you face to face, but out of an overabundance of caution and caretaking for our community, we are electing to do this through a virtual process. And I'm happy that you're here today to join me through this so that you can hear about the things that I'm passionate about and about what the Lake Washington Schools Foundation wants to bring with you while keeping our community safe and healthy. As a co-responding mental health professional for several different law enforcement agencies here in King County, I am afforded by my licensure and training the ability to go out and help our community members on the worst days of their lives. Typically, I'm dispatched to calls with my partner that have a need for a social services support if there is an issue with suicidality or the need for a welfare check, as well as any number of other contributing factors that would call for a police response. Over the course of the work that I do, most communities have come to embrace the idea of having a mental health professional co-respond with law enforcement, because oftentimes what we're called to has a degree or an element of mental health or behavioral health that is rising to the level of needing police support. So I go to calls where the youth in our community are experiencing such distress or such discomfort or a big enough crisis that they're reaching out to first responders as a way to cope with what's going on. Oftentimes when I speak to groups, to families, or to service providers or agencies, I often use a metaphor about a waterfall, and I'll propose it to you like this. If all of us were standing on the side of a river and we saw baby bassinets going downstream, and we saw that there were babies in each of those bassinets, and we knew a little ways down that stream there was a very, very, very tall waterfall, what would all of us be doing? I can guarantee that most of you listening to this right now would say we would be jumping in that river as quickly as we could to grab as many of those baby bassinets as we could. Invariably, we would miss baby bassinets. At a certain point after we've jumped in the river to try and save as many babies as we can, and we know we've lost some, do we stop and say, how about a few of us go upstream to figure out where all the babies are going in? That way we can prevent the babies from getting into the river in the first place. And when I think about that metaphor, I feel like it encompasses very clearly prevention, reaction, and recovery. The prevention of the babies falling into the river, the reaction time to save the ones that have made it in, and the recovery process for how we deal with the folks that have been saved in order to have them build their best lives. And I think in our communities, we have seen a rash increase in the distress of our youth, being faced with social media concerns, being faced with academic pressures, being faced with family and interpersonal relationships, and what the trajectory of futures look like. And for me, it's paramount that we put in the supports to do the prevention, to do the reaction, and to do the recovery so that we are raising our community in such a way that the people that we are interacting with have the skills necessary to be able to carry on a happy, healthy life and contribute in a way that is meaningful and powerful for our communities. As a licensed therapist, I've spent a lot of time working with children and families that have experienced some sort of crisis. And over the course of my career, I've seen about 3 generations of youth and families slowly have the inability through well-meaning interactions and parenting have coping skills necessary to handle a crisis. And when I say that, I mean that when I went to school, we had games and competitions and people won and people lost. And I had to learn how to lose well. I had to learn how to win well. And I had to learn how to deal with a level of discomfort when I was bullied or picked on, but I got respite when I went home. Today, our youth are experiencing 24/7 exposure to the things that cause levels of distress. But in our well-meaning parenting, we've tried to shield our children as much as possible from those things. But our physiology betrays us and tries to get us to believe that these feelings are so intense that they are as though lions, tigers, and bears are coming after us. And the physiological response is so great, the heart racing, the sweaty palms, the hyperventilating, the high blood pressure, that our young people, and frankly adults, can feel as though they're dying. And that is a key factor in mental health development, coping skills structure, and how we support our communities and our young folks. And it's the way to be able to handle those distressing moments that coping skills and mental health care can provide when it's given adequate funding and attention and deliberate motivations to have this be as important as learning to read, as important as learning to do basic arithmetic, and as important as learning how to navigate social and interpersonal relationships. Oftentimes I get asked, what can we do to help the state of our communities, the welfare of our youth, and the overall trajectory of our communities? And quite clearly for me, it's a matter of opening up a dialogue. There is a huge stigma around people that are told that they need to see a mental health professional or a counselor. There's a huge stigma around people that will disclose a diagnosis, or even more so, the individuals that don't want to disclose a diagnosis for fear of judgment or shame or ridicule. The biggest thing that we can do is remember how we used to treat somebody that was diagnosed with cancer back in the 60s and 70s. If you were diagnosed with cancer, it was a point of shame. It was a point of secrecy, and it was a point of something that we never wanted to discuss because there was some level of blame and victimization related to that diagnosis. Now, there's whole months dedicated to cancer awareness. There are whole trajectories, there are whole campaigns dedicated to beating cancer. This is the plight now of having behavioral health and mental health also be treated the same way. Initially, a dialogue has to happen. We have to be able to talk about what we're experiencing, what we're feeling, and what we're seeing. We have to be able to look at that through a cultural lens in order to understand that somebody's viewpoint on wellness may not be the same as someone else's, but that doesn't negate the need to have a conversation so that proper resources that are medically, mental health-wise, and culturally appropriate can be provided to a family. And I will say that all too often, the problem with folks that are having a diagnosis, having a crisis, having a mental health issue, all too often that person is having to do that in a sense of isolation, in a sense of aloneness, and that is incredibly detrimental. When we bear witness to somebody's crisis, when we bear witness and listen to someone suffering, when we bear witness and are just with someone, the lessening of those symptoms, the lessening of the stress, and the marked increase in healing happen. So we need to talk about it. We need to learn about it. We need to educate ourselves, not because we all have to go out and save the world, but we can be that one person in the storm of a crisis that can be that life ring that then can connect that person to the services that they need. There is no shame, there is no imperfection, there is no point in a mental health crisis or a substance abuse crisis or a behavioral health crisis where a human connection isn't beneficial. So if we as a community stand together and show that we will embrace that level of vulnerability and truth, and we will find the appropriate resources for the folks that we interact with, then we are making strides to having the perception of mental health and mental wellness go the way that we fight against cancer about now, in the way that we wear it with a degree of pride that we are sticking together for recovery and survivorship rather than hiding in the shadows in shame and in fear. I want you to consider two things. The first thing is this. I'd like you to think back through the course of your life at a point in time where you were scared out of your mind. I want you to think back to whether it was when you were a kid and afraid of the dark, or when you got in a car accident, or when you were afraid you were going to get in trouble at work, or when you were afraid the person that you loved wasn't going to love you back. I want you to think of a time when you were scared out of your mind. Would that have been easier to deal with if someone was next to you? I also want you to think about a point in time where something was wrong and you didn't know how to fix it. Flat tire on the side of the road, a computer problem when you have a paper due, a ailment or illness that you had that you weren't a physician to fix. So let's think about the time that you were the scaredest in your life and it was something you didn't know how to fix. You'd want somebody with you, and you'd want somebody to be able to help you with what it was that was wrong. The Lake Washington Schools Foundation is making massive steps to being, one, the person that's just there with you so you're not alone, and two, having people with compassion and passion to be the ones that can recognize and diagnose, and not as a clinician, but to at least diagnose the direction of a referral by really pushing and educating about awareness, about mental health first aid, about anxiety, about depression, about the pressures that our young people feel. Because they know, we know, that when you have to struggle through something, if you're doing it with someone, it's a whole lot more bearable. It's a whole lot less scary. And when you know you get to go to somebody that knows how to handle your specific problem, because they maybe recognize that it might be an anxious thing, or it might be a pressure thing, or it might be a stress thing, that you get connected to the right people. You don't get to recognize those things unless you've gone through them and then see them in other people and then say, oh gosh, I went through that also. I bet I can connect you to this person that I know specializes in this. But in the meantime, because I recognize that you're going through this, I'm gonna make sure that you don't have to do it by yourself. There is so much power and so much recovery and so much healing that comes from being able to be with someone on the worst day of their lives, the worst moment of their lives, when that fear tells every cell in your body that it's all going wrong and it will never be fixed. Not doing that alone is so powerful. And then having the background from a mental health first aid standpoint to say, gosh, I know what I think this is. Let me reach out to these people. Let me get these resources in place. Let me reach out to the county, to other school districts, to local police departments, to mental health professionals, to whomever it is has that specialty. That takes a tremendous amount of effort, passion, compassion, connection, vulnerability. And the Lake Washington Schools Foundation is meeting that at a foundational level by providing mental health first aid, by partnering with community agencies, by reaching out to mental health professionals that work for the police department, that work for hospitals, that work for other school districts, in an effort to make sure that we have that cohesion and connection. And that all can't be done, one, without awareness, two, without the passion and the want to be able to give these skills and this gift of coping, and three, without the tremendous amount of funding it requires to be able to have those supports in place. So when I think about things that could be put in place, I think about mental health first aid, I think about counseling agencies, I think about specialty therapists that have a particular type of therapy or a type of problem or a type of concern that they address. But even more so, which if we're in dreamland, that I know each of you can help make a reality, have some therapists that have a specialty in maintaining health. Let's not go find a counselor once everything has gone completely wrong. Let's not go find a counselor once my partner and I show up because something has gone terribly wrong. But let's have somebody that we go to when we say, you know what, today's a good day. Let's have those specialties be in place for sure when we need that reaction and that recovery, but let's have them as a point of prevention as well. And that only comes with a strong foundation and desire to have this be the norm, to have this be the expectation instead of the exception, that we put the youth in our communities first, not just in academics, not just in sports scores, not just in college entrance exams or SATs, but first in mental health. The Lake Washington Schools Foundation put a tremendous amount of effort and planning into an incredible luncheon. And like I said earlier, out of an abundance of caution and a want to protect our community members and do our jobs the safest way we possibly could, we've had to share what our message was to you in this virtual forum. And I thank you wholeheartedly for taking the time to watch these videos, taking the time to hear the message. But I want to thank you even more for something you're about to do. I want to thank you even more because you're sitting here saying, yeah, this makes sense. This feels good. I agree. These are the things that I think are important too. And you're about to take the steps that you can to help build that prevention, that reaction, and that recovery by contributing to the Lake Washington Schools Foundation and making this the actual norm and the expectation. And I want to thank you for spending the time to listen to the messages that the Lake Washington School Foundation has. Our youth, as cliche as it might sound, are our future. And it is our bona fide responsibility to make sure that that future is healthy, is safe, is well thought out, and is prepared for any of the eventualities that we will face as we grow up in this world. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you so much for caring about the students and the families in our community. And thank you so much for the care that you're going to take in making a donation to the Lake Washington Schools Foundation, because you know as well as I do that we're all in this together. And if we can make that together a better, safer, healthier place, then we're going to be better for it all the way around.